Hello and welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If you are a first-time viewer, welcome. It's very nice to have you here on my magnificent channel. So today, this is my first video in 2024, and I thought I'd start it off with an old classic, The Handmaid's Tale. Now, this channel deals with, obviously, it's a horror channel, okay? Dealing with fictional horror, sometimes real life horrors, some thrillers thrown in there. So it's a bit of an eclectic mix, but horror tends to be the underlying theme overall. So why have I chosen The Handmaid's Tale? I think The Handmaid's Tale would generally be considered as, I don't know, sci-fi, dystopian, a dystopian future type of thing. So I think it would probably come more under the heading of sci-fi, much like my video, The Running Man. However, I decided to include this book because it made a great deal of impact on me when I read it. I actually read it towards the end of last year. So, you know, the book itself was actually published in 1984. It's written by Margarat Atwood. And, you know, she's a very prolific author. And so the book has been around for a long time. And I'm including this because I actually, to a certain degree, do consider this to be a horror novel. First of all, a couple of points. Margaret Atwood herself, in the introduction to this particular copy that I'm holding, made it clear that when she wrote this book, she didn't want to have any fantastical elements in it. So it's not. It's you could maybe class it as sci-fi, but it's really grounded in reality. She wanted to write a book in which a book talking about the future, but in which the only technology available would be the technology which was available in society at the time of writing. And she also made it clear that she was right. The events in the book would all be based on things that had actually happened in reality or were actually happening now. And so it's not there are no really fantastical elements to it. And so what is the book about? So obviously The Handmaid's Tale is about a handmaid. What is a handmaid? The handmaids are women who are of, we could say, birthing age, women who are judged to be capable of having children. So they're essentially kept as breeders. And women in this dystopian society have been divided basically into categories. And there are the women who are basically wives. The wives are at the top of the echelon, top of the food chain, so to speak, in terms of women. They are the wives of important men, and they are the most privileged women, which frankly is not saying much. Then there are the handmaids, and then there are the wives who are at a lower level. They're the wives of the proletariat, so to speak, and they're kind of even lower than the handmaids. So women have essentially been divided into these categories. As you can tell from what I've just said, if you haven't read the book, women are second-class citizens, or even not even second-class. Men have taken control of everything, and they're in, well, I suppose you might say, much like in some countries today, they're in full control of everything. Women have been completely disenfranchised, disempowered. They're not allowed to have bank accounts. They're not allowed to hold jobs. They're essentially, basically, I suppose you could say, chattel. All their rights have been taken away. And the thing about this book that's interesting is that it all takes place in a world in which we could recognise, as I've said before, and as Margaret Atwood makes it clear in the introduction, there are no fantastical elements. There are no laser guns, there are no flying cars, there are no robots. This book was obviously written before the internet, so we're far more technologically advanced today than the people in the dystopian future in this book, which is pretty interesting, I think. And so it takes place in a world that we can easily recognise. There's nothing alien. And the fact is that the society is obviously alien, but it's also recognisable because we can see, there are societies in existence today in the world where women are essentially kept, forced to remain at a level of subservience which is equal to what is spoken about in this book. So anyway, the book itself features is narrated by our narrator and our protagonist, who goes by the name of Fred. So I should make it clear, the handmaids don't have names anymore. She's called of Fred because Fred is the man to whom she has been assigned. She lives at his house with his wife, and her job is to be used to produce a child for Fred. So she's called of Fred because she is of Fred. There's another woman who she befriends in the book who goes by the title of Glenn. So this is the only name that they're allowed to have. The handmaids aren't allowed to keep their real names. The handmaids are also obliged to dress in red. They have long red dresses, red headpieces which hide the costumes are designed to, we could say, hide their modesty. We could draw parallels again with situations around the world today, various cultures, various religions. And so there's this. They're identifiable immediately. Of Fred makes it clear in the book as well that handmaids are dressed in red, also because red is a very noticeable colour. And if anyone tries to flee, tries to escape, they'll be far, far more identifiable straight away. The handmaids are trained by women who go by the title of aunts. This is very much a kind of convent-style education. When the women are first forced to become handmaids, they're all put through this kind of handmaid boot camp. And the aunts are the older women who aren't capable of having children anymore, who essentially lay down the ground rules of what a handmaid is supposed to be, is allowed to do, isn't supposed to do, isn't allowed to be, and so on. So basically, if you're a handmaid, you're not allowed to be anything. But this goes for all the women, even the wives. The wives of the upper echelon men who make all the decisions are simply disenfranchised citizens. They have to stay at home. They have to just basically take care of home things. They are far more privileged than the other women because a woman in this position has the handmaid, and they also have servants, other female servants, to do things for them. And the position of the handmaid is actually quite interesting because obviously the handmaid's job is essentially a procreation role. The handmaids don't have any choice in this. They don't have any choice as to which man they're assigned to, or whether they want to be having relations with this man or not. They have no choice. But the wife of the individual doesn't have any choice either. This is how things are prescribed. This is how things have to be. And even we could say the breeding is done in a very, very prescribed manner. I won't spoil it too much, but that's the general idea. So naturally, it's a very, very repressive environment, and of Fred is obviously vastly unhappy. In her previous life, she had a partner, she had a baby. The baby's been a young child rather, and the young child is a girl. The child's been taken away. She doesn't know what's happened to her. She doesn't know if her partner is alive or dead. And so I think one of the great strong points of this book for me was the sheer horror of the situation. Our narrator really makes you, the reader, feel her pain. Because the thing is, all of these people, the oppressors and the oppressed, are living, they're the first generation, we could say, of this kind of society. So they can all remember their previous lives. And this woman, of Fred, she walks streets, when she's allowed to go out, she walks streets in which in the past she had happy memories with her partner, with her child, growing up. And this, for me, was one of the most horrific things, because this poor woman now, these poor women, are living in such a hellish situation from which there is basically no escape. And, you know, and in the case of Fred, she's forced to live in her old neighborhood where she had a normal life. I mean, she frequently talks about when she was a college student with her best friend. And it's just awful when you read these passages, because she's reminiscing about she's got all these memories of her old life when she was happy, when she could live a normal life, when she could be a normal person, and now she's nothing more than a slave. One quick point: when I said there's no escape, there basically isn't. Well, the only escape they have, the only possibility would be to get out of the country and to flee to Canada. So it doesn't go into great detail in the book, but it's quite clear that not every country, it's not a worldwide dystopia. This is something that has overtaken America. And the regime is sort of kind of, from what I can glean, very kind of like fundamentalist, very like there's a mix of fundamentalist Christianity. There's contained within the dictatorship. You know, so we can see parallels to various things that are happening perhaps in the USA today. I mean, wherein, for example, in the USA recently, abortion rights have been repealed by the Supreme Court. So we can see it's quite. Well, that's another terrifying thing, another horrific thing. There's nothing in this book that hasn't happened at some point in history, or that isn't happening now somewhere in the world. And I would say there's no country, I would say, in the world, even in any democracy, where we could say that this kind of thing, not exactly like this maybe, but this kind of thing couldn't happen. There's very much a sense of it could happen here. The book is superbly written. Margaret Atwood is a superb writer. It's very gripping. I found that it grabs hold of you from the first page and it doesn't let you go. It's very character-driven. It's very story-driven. And I think that the world building is absolutely superb. It never feels clunky or forced. And we, the reader, we're given, as the story proceeds, we're given just enough information to keep us abreast of, you know, what's going on in the world, how this dystopian world came to pass. And it's never laboured. It happens very, very organically. But you get this real sense of how this society is functioning, and you get this real sense of how it came to be in the first place. And as I said, it never feels clunky, it never feels forced. You really, really grow to care about Fred and the people who are on her side. And for example, the aunts, there's one aunt in particular. I mean, she's the one who basically trains Fred and her batch, her intake. And the aunts really come across as being loathsome people. And the interesting thing as well is the men who, like, for example, Fred's we could say owner, because that's what he is. I mean, he throughout the book demonstrates certain aspects of his own humanity. Even he, in this situation in which he is the master, there seems to be something that he's missing. You know, having his wife and having a woman simply as chattel doesn't seem to be enough for him. He seems to need more. Also, the ferociously glaring hypocrisy of this society is revealed later on as well. Now, we're all aware of that, for example, politicians or whatever, people who appear in front of the media, you know, they often say one thing and do another. Or, you know, there are plenty of hypocrites from the top of society down. You know, we're all hypocrites sometimes. And the sheer hypocrisy of this society, you know, is indicated. And again, it's done in a very, very, very intelligent way. It's not laboured, it's not forced down your throat. But Margaret Atwood kind of shows us, she shows us the man behind the curtain, so to speak. Anyway, it's an absolutely superb read. I couldn't recommend it enough. I'm a bit late doing a video about it, considering it was published in 1984, and I only read it towards the end of last year, but better late than never. I have here which I purchased over the Christmas time, the sequel. I have not read it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. Apparently, in this book, we find out what happened to Fred, because this book does end on a bit of a cliffhanger. It's very, 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 very ambiguous. You know, there's a lot to discover. You know, does Fred, you know, does she find some measure of peace, some measure of happiness? Does she remain in servitude? Well, you have to read the book to find out. So thank you very much for watching this. I hope you're having a great new year, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.